Welcome to Music City Memoirs. I'm your host, Dave Bechtel. Thanks for joining me as we explore the lives of the great people of Nashville that help give this amazing city the nickname Music City, USA. Today I am joined by the very British and talented Nick Howard.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
being with us here today, Nick.
I'm glad I fall under the category of great Nashville people. Is that what you said? Great Nashville?
Yes, the great people.
Great people
of Nashville. Absolutely.
That's great to hear.
Okay, so we've already established that you're British, and we can obviously hear that. So we know, number one, that you're not from here originally.
Right.
How many people, upon meeting you for the first time, think that you're from Australia as opposed to the UK?
2 people this week have already thought that, indeed. Second one was just moments ago. Will, the proprietor of this lovely facility that we're in today.
Yes.
But it happens often. I think the reason is because I've lived in the US for so long. I think this, the combination of a little bit of American and the British equals Australia for some reason. So I get it all the time. So I've got South African, New Zealand, and British once in a while.
Well, maybe if you spend a couple more decades a little bit further south.
Yeah.
Maybe in Alabama or something like that, then we could,
Who knows what I'll sound like.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting.
So, what's like the worst cliche bad joke upon someone hearing, you for the first time, or that you're from England? Do they do, the God Save the Queen, Mind the Gap?
I get a lot of did you watch the royal wedding? Which this time is actually, I did actually watch it because it looked quite cool, so I did watch it. But I love it. There's like a fascination with British culture still in the US, which is ironic because you guys kicked us out all those years ago, and here we are, everybody's watching the royal wedding.
July 4th isn't a real big holiday over there, is it?
Not a big one. My sister, bless her, I shouldn't say this on publicly, but she what did she say the other day? She's known for these little funny moments, blonde moments, and she said, yeah, well, they have fireworks in England for July 4th too, right? If we miss the ones here. And I was like, not really. That's not really how it works when you're celebrating victory. The loser tends not to celebrate the loss. But anyway, there you go.
So you're originally from England, specifically.
Yeah.
Whereabouts in England? And I don't know why I'm acting like I don't know the answer to these questions.
I was like, wow, Dave.
Yeah.
Just playing it so cool. I'm from a town called Brighton. It's about an hour south of London, on the coast. We have a beach. It's not as it's no Florida coastline.
Yeah, I saw the air quotes there.
Yeah, it's a pebbly beach. It's stone, rocks, but it's the best we got, and it's a great town to grow up in. It's not dissimilar to Nashville actually. I think one of the reasons I love it here so much is because it reminds me a little bit of where I'm from. It's a huge music culture. It's a very, very artsy city. It's always been kind of like the edgy, place in the UK, and that's a great place to grow up in, I think, because it opens your eyes to the world and so many different things, and artistically, it was a great place. I think it must have had a big, part of laying the foundations for me to want to be in the arts, and it's just a really cool place.
So you didn't necessarily have to travel up to London to see a show?
No, not at all. We have great music scene, local music scene, and touring as well. It's a fairly major market. I mean, the UK is so different from the US. It's only an hour away from London, or hour and a half by car, but that's considered like a totally different market. While it's fairly close to London, it's considered a completely different market. So touring acts will come through quite regularly, and we used to go and see shows as young as 15. I would go to like pub gigs and that kind of thing, which is sadly kind of a culture that's dying a little bit in the UK now. But at least when I was growing up, that was like that was the thing to do when you were 15, is to sneak into pubs and watch live music and then give it a go yourself.
If the music scene was so vibrant and such a good thing, then what led you to move over to the States to pursue music?
That's a good question, given everything I just said about how wonderful it is. I think to me it was more about attitude. I was always obsessed with the US, even as a young kid, watching movies. I started playing guitar because of Back to the Future, so I think that was sort of that set in stone my love affair of this country, and I just always had it in my in my mind I would live here one day and find an American girl and settle down and all the rest of it. So I just I love the UK. I love where I'm from. I'm very proud to be British, but there's an optimism about the US normally that's very, very addictive for me and very enticing. This idea of you can sort of achieve anything if you work hard, and it just seemed like a sort of place that you could come with a blank slate, and if you put your head down and work and become good at your craft, you can succeed. And that's why I was sort of led to move over here all those years ago.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
And I already know your story, of course, because we've done a lot together, both in the music world and then also outside the music world. But for the folks that don't know your full story, tell us about how you came over here to the States from the UK.
When I've always been sort of like not by choice really, but I always knew I wanted to be a musician, being in music and a performer. But tried to go the smart way about it by going to college first and getting a degree, and it was always in my mind that I would end up doing music. But I went to college in the UK, studied computer science, got an internship in New York that no one else in my college applied for some reason. I was just very, very fortunate. It came around one day. I was like, hey, want to work in New York? I was like, yes. And so thanks to the lack of competition, I got the gig. And that was when I was 19 years old, or 20. So I came over. My sister had already moved over to the States years before I had. She also, I guess, saw the American dream as something she wanted to pursue. So I had family here, got my foot in the door through that, graduated, came back over, worked for 5 years in an office job, while in the evening I would go and wait tables and hustle to make money to record music and play shows and write and record an EP. This was all in the early 2000, like 2005, 2006, and slowly but surely I was able over the course of years to build up enough of a music career that at one point I was able to switch completely and become a full-time musician. So everything has always been a bit of I've always had to go the harder and longer route in my music career and in life, but I feel like then when good things happen, you really appreciate them. So, and then fortunately, fingers crossed, touch wood, since then I haven't had to go back into the other world. So here we are. That's
great. So you moved from Brighton straight to New York City?
Kind of, yeah. I was in college in Nottingham, which is where Robin Hood is from.
Yeah.
I used to hang out with him frequently. So I kind of moved here directly after I graduated, like 2 weeks later, I came over. So I was very lucky.
Was there a little bit of a culture shock with that, or did you kind of know what to expect?
Not really. I knew what to expect, having lived here, and done an internship for a year, and would come over at that point several times. I mean, New York's a culture shock for anyone. I think if you move to New York from London, it might not be such a big difference. They're very similar, but from a relatively sleepier town in the Midlands in the UK to New York is like, hello. Wow, and so I think anyone that goes to New York there's a huge, even America. I mean, I meet people here all the time, almost daily, who go, "Wow, New York, couldn't imagine living there." I'm like, "But this is your country,
Yeah.
But it's the same thing in the UK. Some people find London to be just mayhem. So there was definitely that, but I loved it. There's such an energy of New York, and when you're in your 20s, it's just like everything you need and want, and it inspires you and energizes you in your 20s, and then as you get a little bit older, it starts to drain you and do the opposite. So you got to get out, move to Nashville.
Yeah. So you were working computer job, IT.
Yeah.
And how did that kind of come to an end?
There was a couple of things that happened. Like I felt like I was coming to this point where I was doing like this like as boring as you could get job during the week. I mean, I worked in like there was some exciting parts of the job I did in the day. It was early days of like mobile, marketing, so like pre-apps, and just the apps came. So there was kind of some excitement in that. I'm a little bit of a nerd, so it was kind of an exciting time. We worked for like American Idol, and we're doing all their text voting and all that kind of stuff. So it was kind of some overlap into what I wanted to do. But I was getting a few good gigs. I was opening for a couple of bigger names. I'd open for Gavin DeGraw, and I started to get some bookings at some festivals, and I'd already done my first record, and we'd got lots of like syncs and TV and that kind of stuff. So I was like really trying to balance this, like it's like being like Clark Kent and Superman, only not as cool as either. During the day, kind of just pretending like nothing was going on outside of work, and then in the evening, just like stripping that off and trying to be, you know, a musician. It's a weird like life to lead. But slowly but surely things were happening so much it was really hard to like keep it a secret anymore that I was really pursuing music. And in the very end of 2009, I did a college booking showcase. The way you get college bookings here in the US is a huge market, is to do they do these showcases, and the bookers from all the colleges across the states or in regions come and they watch you, and if they like you then they book you. And I was able to book a whole year's worth of music work through doing one of these the showcases are really hard to get, so finally I got one. That coincided with just a couple of other things happening, getting my first tour opening for a band in Europe and in the US, and I was able to go to my boss and say, okay, I'm going to give it a shot, you know, and they were really supportive, and that was that. So it's just, you know, everything I've been working on for like 5 years came to a head, and it was enough for me to do it. So I took the leap. Here we are.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was cool.
And so a couple things happened, knowing your history. Not too long after that, you did come down here to Nashville and do some work, which we collaborated on. But then pretty shortly after that, you were on a tour kind of supporting that.
Right.
And then which led you to kind of like another sort of big moment.
Right.
In your career.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit of the story about how you got to be on television?
Yeah, for sure. It's funny because it's our project here, which was my second record, which is a great story in itself to talk about. It was right in the middle of this. So around that same time that I switched over to music full time, I opened for a band called Boyce Avenue. Really good friends of mine, been great to me as a musician over the years. We toured in Europe, and when we were in Germany specifically, or Central Europe, I was like, wow, this is really like resonating well here. Seems to be a nice connection between my music and people over here for whatever reason that might be. And then later that year, I got asked to go and open for a band called Lifehouse over in Europe as well. And so I was really building like a decent fan base, ironically, back in Europe, you know, having spent all these years in the US. Then right after that, did the second record with you down here, and we did a couple of songs out in LA as well, but the bulk of it was here. And that was a great experience because that was my first time in Nashville. And I'd heard, you should consider recording in Nashville. It's really cool. It's refreshing compared to New York and LA. And it was exactly that. And we had the beautiful, experience. Record sounded great. Got Big Dave up a little bit here. It's fantastic. No, I love it. I so love the way it is today. And that, I think, musically and from a production level really elevated me, and so then I signed an indie record deal in Europe off the back of that. They put out that record, did pretty well, got some radio play. This is like 2011. Then into 2012, we're still kind of doing the same thing, open for a bigger band, headline tour, open for a bigger band, headline tour. So I was constantly on the road, hundreds and hundreds of shows. And then I just kind of reached a plateau. Like I just felt like I reached a plateau where I was like, how long can I keep doing this for? Like putting out music, through a label, albeit, but it's still independent. Open for a bigger band tour, It's like I felt, and around that same time, The Voice in Germany were casting for the next season, which was the second season for them. They reached out to my then manager and said, do you have anyone that might be a good fit? He was like, would you be interested in this? And I was like, well, that could be a cool thing, because the power of television is the power of television. And it was weird because The Voice is really cool, I think, because, it may have changed now, but it felt like the Idol type shows were really casting people that had no professional music experience. Whereas The Voice had always really interesting stories. People like me who had a career of sorts but were looking to elevate it. People that had a career 10 years prior that had since fallen off the map. It was a really interesting kind of group of people. And so I felt for me that was a safer environment to be in for that type of show. Anyway, so the caveat of me being on the show was The music was no problem, but they said I had to learn German to speak with the judges.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it was kind of heavy. But I was like, well, never been one to turn down a challenge, and so I gave it my best shot and learned as much as I could in 2 months, and then went on TV in front of 10 million people and probably made a fool of myself.
Did you ever misuse a word that you thought mistranslates something, or were you good?
The best example of that is they do these little teasers, before that night's show. So you'd see it here in the US as well, like coming up tonight, whatever, between the night, the news, the local news, and I was still really hazy at like understanding questions, and so I was brought with one of the contestants, and the host, he said in German, how are you gonna win tonight? It was like the battle round or something, or like further on in the show. I thought he said, what are you gonna sing tonight? So my answer, I just said, Yellow by Coldplay, which if you think about it, was actually a great answer to the to the how are you gonna win? Yellow, Coldplay. That's it. That's all you need to know. That's what I'm singing. And he was like, okay, and carried on. So those kind of moments happened a lot, and I don't know. They'd say things like, when you come on stage, turn left. I'd be like, yep, got it, and just go the other way, So stuff like that. I think it was maybe amusing or frustrating for the production team. I don't know, but
yeah,
what are you gonna do? Ended up winning.
Yeah, I was just gonna, I guess that challenge, you arose to it, and that didn't seem to be much of an issue for you.
Yeah.
So you walked away with the trophy.
With the trophy, yeah. I think it's just, music is music, and most of the music on the show is English, language, but it's amazing to me sometimes when I'm touring in other countries, because you sing in a language is not native to those people, but it doesn't really matter. It's like the emotion behind the lyric is more important than what the lyric is, and they can almost understand exactly what you're saying anyway. It's like that for me. If I listen to music in another language too, I don't have to understand the language to understand what the person's singing about, and that's the beauty of it, really, and that's why it connects universally and globally. So it was a really cool experience for me, and people ask me sometimes would I do it again, because there's challenges from doing a show like that. You're definitely put into a box of a winner of one of those kinds of shows, and then you have to fight to sort of then prove again that you're a real artist. It's all very strange. Doesn't really make any sense, but I would still 100% do it again, because at that point in my career it was like, well, this is something I need to do, keep things going.
What's the biggest positive that you got out of doing, singing competition show?
I think that the biggest thing is you can't replicate that kind of exposure any other way. Television still has the power of reaching instantly, in this case 10 million people, whatever it was, which you can try and get a viral video, you can try and get all the radio play you want, but ultimately if you can combine your voice and your face or whatever it is together, then it's just the most powerful medium still, even in 2018. So, in terms of getting my name and my voice out there, my songs, that's another thing about The Voice, is you can sing originals, once you get later in the show. So it was a huge thing for me. It was great, and to give like an example of the power of it, that like minutes after my blind audition aired, every show I had booked, I had a whole European tour booked, every single one sold out, even the ones that weren't in that country, and sometimes I think I should have just bowed out then and played it cool, but but alas I didn't, because I never thought I would win the show. I just didn't think an English guy could win the show. But ironically, in the final of the show, 3 of the 4 contestants weren't German, which is funny.
Wow.
Yeah, it was myself.
So did they change the rules the following year?
Probably, yeah, keep us out. Yeah, I mean, I remember someone said something nice about it. They were like, that represents, at that point, any country now, it's a mix of, we live in such a international world that it's kind of irrelevant where you are. You're going to have people from all over the place, and so a lot of people found it really, really nice. And they use this word sympathisch in Germany, which we don't really have our direct translation would be sympathetic in English, which we don't really use that, but it's, we don't really have a word for it, but I think they found me to be humble, and I think that's the key, and maybe that's why I was able to win it.
They should have given you a humility award.
Yeah, exactly.
But then you wouldn't have been able to tell anyone about it.
Exactly, I wouldn't have been able to accept it because it would have gone against my humbleness.
So obviously, pretty big positives in gaining a fan base. Were there some negatives that are associated with going on a show like that, and then especially winning?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you are forever going to be associated with that show, and that can be good and bad. I still hear, when I hear Kelly Clarkson's name in the US, I still hear it. American Idol winner Kelly Clarkson. I'm like, wow, if she hasn't proved at this point, that she's more than. But it's what people know. It's how they're going to relate, and younger people in the States would have no idea about America, that she was on American Idol. It was such a long time ago. They weren't even born, half of her fan base, But she's still American Idol winner Kelly Clarkson or Carrie Underwood. So you have that, and that's good and bad. In Germany specifically, there was these kinds of shows had a bad reputation. The Voice helped that a little bit because it was cast really well, and so people took it a bit more seriously than the others. But they still had this, and still have this connotation of that's who you are. You're a singer in a casting show, which is only frustrating when you've played 1,000 gigs and my story couldn't be more of an independent. Rags to no riches, rags to better rags story. It's one of like extreme hard work, dedication, and sacrifice. Like any musician, I use that as a platform for 6 months of my whole career. But going in that there's that possibility, and you use it when you need to use it, and you just don't mention it when you don't need to. That's how I kind of treat it.
Yeah.
So. I'm still extremely grateful that I had the chance to be on that show and win it, and I would do it all again for sure in a heartbeat.
Yeah,
it was awesome. I
think for me, one of the things that I've connected with you emotionally about is some of your struggles growing up, and I don't think it's unfair to say that your dad wasn't the kind of man that you strive to be. Is that okay to say? Yeah, that's fair to say. I mean, he had a lot of great qualities, but a sort of equal number of not far from perfect qualities.
Sure.
Yeah. But is it okay to say that has in spite of those difficulties, that has been a motivation for you? Maybe some of his shortcomings have, for sure, have motivated you to maybe rise above that.
Yeah, I think in life, I think we talk about this quite often. I think depending on your circumstance and your background, I still think we all have choices, and we can decide to emulate our parents, or we can decide to become our own people. And both of my parents, though struggle with some faults, both had some characteristics that were wonderful, especially my mum. And I think that you use that and you say, okay, that's a good one, I'll use that, and then you develop your own character, and everyone has a choice in life, and my choice was to be the best version of myself I could be, to be a better father, especially than my dad, but not to discredit moments in his life where he was able to do it. It's just they were so infrequent that I try and do it daily. So yeah, I think you that's what I mean, I think music was a kind of therapy for me, as it is for most musicians, most people in the arts, of dealing with your life, your experiences, understanding them, helping you get from one place to another. And I think that's also why people enjoy listening to music or looking at art or whatever, experiencing any one of the arts, because it makes them feel some kind of connection with someone that might have experienced something similar. And I think that's why we all listen to music. It's to invoke some kind of reaction that we understand, and to allow us to realize that we're not alone, and that this is something that other people experience and whatnot. So there's a very deep answer to your question.
Yeah, no, that's good. You had a pretty tough year a couple years back, where you had both of your parents pass away within the same year, within just a few months of each other. and you have a song that you dedicated to your mom, who was a really big influence in your life, especially when it came to pushing you in your music.
Yeah.
And the song is A Good Man.
Yeah.
Can you maybe explain a little bit about that, just a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So it was a particularly difficult year. In the space of 1 year, I became a father in February, lost my mother in October, and my dad in November. So it was a really crazy emotional roller coaster. I'm very fortunate. My mom got to meet my daughter, which was amazing. But music. It's funny, writing music. It's if I sit here and try and write a song, or we do a co-write and we try and write a song, it's like, what should we write about today? And if you haven't had anything kind of move you, it's very difficult. So you have to make things up. Wow, God, I could be really angry about this thing. The easiest music to write is when you're writing, just it gushes out. And throughout my career, that's always been the case, and I'm almost certain every writer, unless you're Max Martin, would say the same thing. He can switch it on a dime. So Good Man is just, it's I knew I had to write something, after that experience, and I didn't want to write something. I tend to write songs that make a positive out of a negative. That's typically how my songwriting is always structured, or an answer to a question. And so with Good Man, it was just, I wanted to write something about my mom that was true and that just was really real, and that's exactly how I felt. She, as I mentioned earlier, my mom had some personal faults, and she had a hard life in a lot of places, but she instilled some incredibly important values in me. I grew up with my grandmother, my sister, and my mom, so I was surrounded by great women, my whole life, and the values that were instilled were unbelievable, despite shortcomings in certain family members. And so the song is just about, acknowledging that and being grateful for it, and thanking her, and it's great. I love it. It's a real connection I have, spiritually. Whenever I play it, I feel very, very close to her. And I think people, I know for a fact that people can relate to that song because people tell me, but I can see it in the audience, and it's often a lot of very emotional experience. And I'm really glad that came out of somewhere in me.
In one of our earlier podcasts, we talked to Jerry McPherson, and he had mentioned that the thing that frustrates him about kind of the state of our industry is the loss of what he calls the deep cut. And that song to me would be a deep cut. That's probably not going to end up on a top 40 radio station, but those are the songs that probably mean the most, and that have probably the most kind of true emotional connection with people that listen to them, and that's why I wanted to ask about that song particularly.
Absolutely, and when you write those songs, you're really just like you're being, autobiographical. You're not thinking about writing a song for radio or something like that. So or a song for TV. It's just like, here's a song. This is what I'm doing right now. This is totally honest, and it's just coming out of my heart, and here it is. And those are the best songs, really, and I agree with you and Jerry on that. The album culture is unfortunately, it's shrinking, and we're in a singles culture, which is great, but sometimes you kind of want to get lost in a record, and I still want to put records out, try and really think about the track listing and the flow of the record, and that's important. It's a bit of a dying art, but it's really important because as a music fan, I too love to find those types of songs and like, man, this is a total switch from whatever was going on before, and I love that, when you discover those. So yeah, totally agree.
What's it like as a singer-songwriter or creator artist to be singing songs and hearing the lyrics and melody that you've written kind of come back at you from the audience? It's
the best feeling in the world. It's like a drug, It's the reason we keep kind of doing it and trying to write that next song that's going to get that kind of reaction. There's nothing more flattering as an artist than to have that experience. It's the best. I love it. And I'm always just so in awe and grateful to have that experience, because it's just incredible. So I always say to my fan base that I will keep writing music if that's the reaction that I get, that people resonate with the stuff I'm writing. And if people stop resonating with it, then I'll stop doing it. But as long as one person's finding some kind of connection with something I've written, I'll keep going.
So you have not been in a Nashville resident proper,
right,
for terribly long,
right.
But you've been part of our community now for close to 10 years now.
Yeah, long time.
What, moving forward, this is kind of a thing that I ask everyone, because I always like to look towards, what can we do to make whatever we're doing better? What's how can we eliminate the bad stuff, and what are the good things that we can strive for? What would you say is like your hope for Nashville? From where we're at 2018, how would you like to see Nashville get better?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I mean, I love Nashville. Obviously, it's changed so much, even in the slightly less than decade I've been coming here. It's kind of crazy to see the change. When we first came here, I was like, oh, I thought it would be bigger. Really, that was my first. I think that's a lot of people's thought then, because you hear so much about it, and so much great music is made here and whatnot, and you just think it's going to be a bit bigger. Especially when you come from New York, LA, which are its sister art cities in the US, and they're metropolises. Nashville is this cute little, town in the middle of Tennessee, and that's I think why we liked it so much. It's like, oh god, you can achieve the same things here artistically, but not have to deal with the strain of being in a huge city like New York and LA. And over the last decade that we've been coming here, it's changed so much. The buildings are getting taller. The restaurants are getting more expensive. The rents are getting more expensive. So unfortunately, if you have a good thing, people are going to want to come and experience it. And so Nashville, that's what Nashville is. It's the word got out that here's a great alternative, artistic for musicians and people like us, to LA and New York, and you can actually afford to live here, and yada yada. And so fortunately for the people that were here before, that's probably a welcome change, but also a challenging one, because it makes everything more expensive. There's more competition, yada yada yada. And you see this with other cities as well. But Nashville's so unique, I think. I don't really think there's anywhere like it. It's like a small town feel, but it's a big city vibe now. What can I tell you? I think it's done everything right so far. I think at some point, you have to acknowledge that it is becoming an international city. I'm selfishly grateful there's now a direct flight from London. So
sure.
if you thought Lower Broadway was drunk already, it's about to get even drunker. So it is becoming that city, and I think it's important to recognize that and to allow it to grow. And there are things that are going to change about it that are inevitable. So you can sort of help them change, or you can fight it until tooth and nail. But unfortunately, it's just one of those things. Lots of other cities, Brighton, where I'm from, went through this as well. It was this kind of like hippie little liberal arts town, that people would get away from London for a weekend. And now it's like an alternative to London, and people commute from Brighton to London every day for banking jobs and things like that. So it's really changed, and similar things, house prices through the roof and there's a lot of similarities. And I think Nashville should just embrace this awesome thing that's happening here and go with it and see where it ends up, because it could be one of the best cities in the world. It already has the makings of it, and it would be great to see it like really embrace it, and but I think it's doing everything right, obviously.
That's great.
Yeah.
In closing, you have a very precious little daughter.
Thanks.
Who I love seeing every now and then, and we're gonna time stamp this video by asking this question. You have another one,
right?
I mean, literally moments away.
Yeah, I have my phone's on silent, but I can see it just in case there's a phone call that comes through.
Yeah. Your music, what do you hope that does for their future?
That's a good question. I think it's so important to have music around in general, you know, with kids. For us, my sister and I, growing up, our family was so musical. You know, it was always there. We were in church, there was music. At school, there was music. We used to sing every morning in school. I loved it. You know, I was like, well, this is great. You know, the arts are so important, and so it's natural for us to make sure music is a big part of our kids' life. We try not to force it on them at all. You know, it's very, very natural. Like, you know, I never want to be a parent that forces like an instrument on a child or anything like that. If they want to do it, that's great. It's around them, so they'll make that decision. But if they want to be a pro athlete, I'd really support that. So I think you know, my daughter has seen me play live. You know, she's come to some concerts, and it's amazing for me to experience that with a little family as they get older, and to see her enthusiasm in music, and you know, it's great. I mean, I think you stay young through your kids, you know, and you stay in tune with what's kind of, you know, what's new and interesting and fresh, and so it's been really fun for us to you know, to listen to the music that she would listen to. I mean, she's really young, but you know what I mean, like listening to pop music that's the newest pop music and things like that, and be like, okay, cool, that's the way the direction is going. But I just think music's so important in anybody's life, and I'm glad that it's inevitably going to be around my kids. I think it expands your mind and your horizons and your ideas, and it's a good friend. You know, music's a good friend. So that's what I hope it is for her, as it has been for me my whole life.
That's great. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to come here, especially when we're on the edge of our seats waiting for Miss Caitlin.
Yeah, I know, right, exactly. Yeah, I know, I might get in trouble for this, but you know, it was worth it.
So, well, thanks so much for stopping in.
Absolutely, thank you, Dave. And this is a great podcast, and I wish you guys continued success with it. It's really cool.
Great. Thanks so much.